Okay, what I'm going to talk about is what was actually officially launched today. Press release just went out. Database solutions for DB2 with next generation technology. I'm going to focus a lot on Reorg today, but the technology goes through all the utilities and will begin being incorporated into all of our solutions as we move forward. We're calling it the new paradigm, and I'm going to explain what that means as we go through. This is a fundamental change to data management in DB2, and I hope you can see that as we go through it today. Let's keep this very interactive so it's actually useful for you. I can come up here and tell you all the features, all the benefits, everything, but ask me questions, and I'd love to help you with them. If we can't, we'll get somebody later on who can help you and get you any information you want. What's important is that our world in data management has fundamentally changed on us. You're hearing a lot about digital business. A lot of that is from us vendors who are telling you about it, but you're feeling it also, and it is a real thing. This is from Gartner, and what's most scary about this is the fact that all the pressures that we're feeling right now, all the challenges that we're having to overcome, you hear these in every single session, the things you're facing. It's the tip of the iceberg. Within the next 5 years, like they're saying, there's going to be 30 billion devices connected basically straight to your data. I've heard an even scarier statistic from Gartner, and maybe from IDC, that we could have 50 times more data by 2020 than we have right now. We're already struggling to manage what we've got, and it's going to continue to explode. What is also most telling here is this new world makes the prior one obsolete. We simply can't keep doing things the way we always have been. We're talking about this. You see incremental improvements as we go along. It doesn't keep up with where our customers are driving us, and not just BMC's customers, I mean your customers, where they are driving you and the demands they're putting on you. If we go back to the beginning, DB2 is a great database, and it always has been. It was a cute little database back in the 80s. If you think about this in relation to today, this is actually from one of our people's database back at the time that was considered a big one. You had gigabytes worth of data. You had individual table sizes that were maybe 100,000 rows. You may have gotten up into a couple billion, and that was a gigantic object that you were managing. You had hundreds of objects to deal with and a transaction rate of a couple hundred. The other thing about this was at 5 o'clock everybody went home, database shut down, everyone went home. Weekends was down. It was great. That was the way everything worked. It was also a very structured database. Everything fit into fields nicely. It's what we've always been used to, very structured data. This is what we used to deal with. Then DB2 began growing up very quickly. All of the utilities that we used to manage it at this time were built as it was a small database and handled it pretty well. We could do reorgs of tens of thousands of rows. We could do reorgs of hundreds of thousands of rows. We could do reorgs after hours because no one was accessing our data. DB2 grew up very quickly, and by the 90s, you had 50 million rows. We had customers that had hundreds of millions of rows that were just monsters that they were trying to deal with. You had tens of gigs worth of data, and you had a lot of indexes. People started adding a lot of non-partitioning indexes to their data, and it helps their applications. This started causing major problems for utility vendors. Indexes are a nightmare for utility vendors. What's scary here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit as we go through, because of some of these problems that face utility vendors, you start seeing changes to the actual physical database to try and fix some of those problems. Y'all, flash forward a ways, you started seeing indexes change, and you had DIPSIs come online. It wasn't really to help you. It only fixed maybe 5–10% of applications, but it really helps a reorg, but it hurts your applications. There's other things we can talk about as we go through. Indexes are a problem, and they've gotten bigger. What was happening is your data is getting more and more complex, and the tools you're using are still the same thing they always were. So what they gave you to help was JCL generators, and probably everybody in here uses a JCL generator. It's great. JCL is incredibly complex when you're trying to manage lots of data, setting up sort workspace, This sets it up for you automatically, and then you can run it. So that was the initial automation. In the 1990s, this is pretty much the way everybody ran things. There's variations on this, but it basically boils down to this process. An object needs to be reorged early in the week, let's say Monday. By Wednesday, you run statistics on it. Thursday, you generate jobs based on those statistics. Friday, you verify the JCL to make sure it is what you want. You put it in schedulers to figure out what you can run in parallel. Saturday, you actually run those utilities. Anything you don't get called on that night, you come back in on Sunday, fix the errors, and resubmit them. You spent all week long managing your database, and that was automation. That's fine. Databases were pretty complex, but this got us through with what we needed. In the 2000s, you started having, in the late 1990s and 2000s, you had some advancements in utilities. This pretty much looks identical, but what you'll notice is on Saturday, you're now running online utilities. But you still ran them in a batch window because they're not really online. Jim D mentioned this morning in his presentation, let's just face it, a reorg is an outage. We all know that. And online reorgs are trying to give us less of an outage, but they're an outage. So we still run them in batch windows. There's diagrams that some vendors have of when to run what kind of reorgs. You know, run some offline, run some in a batch window, but definitely find a quiet time to try and run reorgs. So this is what we've been dealing with in the 2000s. Now the world has exploded on us. You hear cloud all over the place. Everyone in this room knows cloud just means that the data is eventually going to a mainframe. I think the number is 90% of application data ends up on the mainframe, and a big portion of that goes to DB2 that we're forced to manage. This data is coming from everywhere. It's coming from mobile devices. You actually don't even generate a lot of the data now that you're having to manage. It's being generated online. It's being generated by customers. It's being generated all over the place, and you're having to manage it without even really knowing what it looks like. We also have unstructured data being forced into the structured database. It's been there for a while, but now it's the way of life. This is one of the things that IBM has been talking about. LOBs are a new way of life. You better be ready to deal with them. We'll talk about this towards the end. This, you know, the way you fit unstructured data into a structured database is incredibly complex and prone to errors, and it makes your life even harder. But it's what you have to deal with right now. DB2 has kept up though. DB2 has found ways of doing it. It's a huge database now. It can manage a lot more than it actually has. Right now, we know customers with 70 plus terabytes worth of data. Hundreds of millions of rows are common. That's not big anymore, that's just common. Now, multiple billion rows are the big objects, and tens of billions of rows are the big objects. Number of objects has just exploded. People are managing tens of thousands of these all the time. And transactions per second, over 10,000. What's also telling about this and not on the slide, you know, we talk to customers and say, I have 150,000 transactions a minute. Okay, well then what's your slow time? 150,000 transactions a minute. There's no slow time. Throughout the night, customers are still accessing your data. They're around the world. We all know this story. People in Europe are accessing your data in the middle of the night while we're asleep, but it still has to be online available for them. So now that cute little database that we've been dealing with is a monster that we've got to try and tame. And we're given the exact same utilities that we were given before, with some incremental changes along the way and wrappers put around them to try and automate them or just make the generation of them a lot easier. So if we look at this process, what's really wrong with it today? You know, Monday the object needs to be reorged. Well, if we look at this from an application standpoint, which is a big, it's a big issue with data management. It came up again in Jim's presentation this morning. Someone said, well, we do it that way because we've done it that way someone 20 years ago told us we have to do it that way. That's pretty common. A lot of the processes in place are in place because they were set up 20 years ago, or I heard somewhere that someone told me I have to be doing it this often. And so we set up processes that do it that way. We can't measure, we don't have time to do that. We're just trying to keep up with where we are. So we don't know if what we're doing is efficient. We don't know if it's actually making a difference. We just know we have to do it. But the case here is the object needs to be reorged, so your applications are now running slower and it's adding cost. Throughout that entire process, you didn't actually correct that until Saturday. This is one example, and I'm sure everyone right now is saying, well, I don't do that. I run every couple days, or I have one scheduled every 2 days, so I automatically reorg it every 2 days. Well, the same thing applies, just on a little bit smaller scale, but with actually a bigger curve when we're talking here. This actually impacts your application. We need to get to the point where we're looking at data management from an application perspective. One of Jim's talks this morning, in his talk this morning, was how often should you be doing reorgs? It boils down to as often as your applications demand. You have to be doing this from a business perspective. The only reason you're doing a reorg, it does not, the way he said it was, it does not impact your bottom line. And that's actually something I disagree with Jim on. It doesn't positively impact your bottom line, but when you don't do it, you will cost your company money. Because the actual effect on application performance is MLC charges. Your applications are now costing you more money. That's costing IT. So this process is what we're pretty much stuck with today. One thing to point out that we'll talk about, the utilities are the same underlying. The things that have changed are those wrappers. This utility automation is a JCL generator that sits outside of the utilities and just makes it easier to set them up. But the underlying utility itself is still the exact same architecture as it was 30 years ago. So, okay, what? So what? We know what the problem is. That's why everybody's here today. There is a problem. We're struggling to do this. But what else can I do? For one thing, we know we can't keep using 30-year-old technology. We can't even use that to manage the databases of today, much less the databases of 5 years from now when we got 50 times the amount of data. We have to also stop trying to make the database fix our management problems. I'm not going to get too much into this, but come by our booth and we'll talk about it in more detail with some more experts. But there's a lot of talk right now about index updating. That helps for 10% of applications. It hurts. I mean, it helps 10% of applications. It helps reorg. That's really the reason it's implemented. We need to stop trying to make the database fix problems with utilities. The answer, unfortunately, is to scrap everything and start over. Fundamental change in architecture to try and handle what we're managing today. Let's think about that. If we knew that DB2 was going to be 70 terabytes worth of data, and we were going to be managing tens of thousands of objects, would we design the utilities the exact same way we did back when DB2 was maybe a couple gigs of data and had 100 objects? Absolutely not. They've got to change. So what do we know? We know that modern day databases, they're unpredictable activity patterns. Most places cannot tell me that I've gotten quiet time. They can't tell me that this is my downtime. It just doesn't exist. Or we don't know when it's going to be. Availability is no longer one of those things that we say it's something our company's trying to get to. It's now a demand from your customers. Remember right now, customers can access you and your competition from their cell phone. So if they don't get the response time they want, they can switch insurance, they can switch banks, they can leave you and go to a competitor with their thumb on their cell phone. It's that simple. There's really no barriers for them changing. The time to find and fix problems is seconds now. I've actually heard that probably the best monitor that you may be using is Twitter, because problems with your database are going to show up in social media before you get notified by your monitor. Customers that don't find out what they're looking for, if I go to my bank and I can't get my account, I can immediately go on Facebook and tell the world how terrible this bank is, and you can't fix that. And then this came up again this morning. There's a skills issue. Someone in the presentation this morning pointed out that their business is hiring more and more people who simply don't have the database skills of the people in this room. But they're the ones that are going to be forced to manage this incredible animal with old technology. So that's a big problem. So what's needed then? We need true automation. We need adaptive automation, not something that just wraps around and works for everybody. It needs to work for me. As a company, I want it to do what my company needs it to do. It needs to adapt to my needs. It needs to make dynamic adjustments. Things change, things happen. It needs to be able to do that as it's going. It needs to self-learn. A big point, actually, again, from the presentation this morning on utilities, by increasing percent free to 20%, we can actually reduce the frequency of reorgs. Well, then why doesn't Reorg just do that for me? If Reorg knows that it's been running too often, why doesn't Reorg dynamically change the percent free and not have to run the next day? Well, it would be nice to be able to do. And it has to be simple. People that don't have the database experience don't want to be experts in our products. They want to be able to just go manage the data. If I tell you to do a reorg, go do it. That's all I want to happen. And on top of this, they got to cost nothing from a run standpoint. They've got to be efficient. You've got to be able to manage 70 terabytes worth of data with less money. So let's go through some of the requirements and figure out what we really need to build these utilities. We can actually build these from the ground up differently. What do we really want? If we keep saying, I want my utilities to be available, well, what does that mean? Well, we keep saying 24/7, but we're close, you know? What if I can get you down to a minute of downtime? You see this a lot, every release, that we're getting more available, more available. When is that good enough? So let's say if I told you I could give you 1 minute of downtime, is that good enough? Might be for some companies, but if you look at an example, if you're doing 1,000 transactions a second and we're down for 60 seconds, 60,000 transactions, you basically have 60,000 potential failures and 60,000 potential dissatisfied customers. That's not good enough anymore. The reason we have a credit card there is that real case of there's an imperative in, I think it's the credit processing, that after so much time of delayed response, it immediately goes to another provider. So you just lost a customer without them doing anything. It was automatically transferred to somebody else. So even during the downtime, when we switch data sets, everyone's familiar with fast switch, that's downtime. Well, now we're saying that's not good enough. We can't even be unavailable during that time. When we say unavailable, when we say availability, we mean 100% availability, no downtime. That's what we want. Okay, done. Scalability. I don't care if I've got tens of billions of rows. I don't care if today I have 1 billion, tomorrow I have 10 billion. Just do it. Go manage my data. But how am I supposed to sort that? Maybe we can make sort a little bit faster, make sort a little bit more efficient. Well, the data is growing even faster than that. When we've got 50 times the amount, what are we going to do? One option is go buy more sort DASD. You could buy 5 times the amount of DASD you've got today. But we have to cut costs at the same time. So that doesn't work. The only way to efficiently move forward, completely eliminate the sort. We need to be able to do a reorg and never sort the data. Done. They have to be simple. I don't want to be experts in BMC's products. I just want BMC to manage my data. I tell you to go do a reorg, go do it. That's it. I don't care about your syntax. Your syntax may not even fit my needs. So I don't want to be bound by your syntax. I want to be able just to tell you what to do and you go do it. If something goes wrong, again, I don't want to be experts in your products to know what it was. Figure out how to fix it. Either end gracefully, or even better yet, automatically fix it and move on. If you can't find space during an online reorg, I don't want you to shut down the entire process. I want you to go find more space based on my business rules and dynamically keep going. Okay? Fine. And I want everything to run in parallel. But again, not with me having to be an expert and tell you which of your products can run together, how many of your reorgs I can run. I want you to be able to figure out, based on my system, what I can run. Don't forget, processors aren't getting faster. You're getting more and more processors. You're getting more and more sysplex nodes. The growth in the mainframe is going to be horizontal, and it is horizontal in all computers. It's now horizontal. So I don't want you to speed up this way. I want your speed to get wider. Spread the work out and just do it. But again, make it simple. I want to tell you to reorg. You figure out how to use what I've got and get it done fast. Done. So, summing up, what we need is simple to use solutions that are completely available, that don't sort, and they run in parallel. No, let's talk about JCL generation. We already said this process doesn't work. At some point, there's a lag between when the object needs to be done and when it actually is done. I still have to get involved to figure out what I can run together, when I can run it, how I can fit it in my scheduler. So we need to get rid of JCL generation. Okay? Fine. So again, simple solutions, fully available, never sort, run in parallel, taking advantage of the way the system's actually architected. And I need that adaptable automation that follows my rules and learns from it and never generates JCL. So what you get is next generation technology. We have this now. All of those things that we say we have to do, we've got customers using it on some of the biggest environments in the world. You're going to hear this all week long from BMC, next generation technology. You'll hear MGT. What do we mean by that? We mean the technology required to not only manage your data today, but manage your data where it's going. Some of the things involved in that are what we just talked about. We call that parallelism server technology, and I'll get into more detail on all these, but we call that parallelism server technology. Right now, when you submit a job, that job runs one object. Maybe it runs a defined list of a couple objects, and it can subtask a little bit to get some parallelism. What we can do is actually massive parallelism. You tell us to do 15,000 objects at one time, all with hundreds, thousands of partitions, whatever. We can break all that work up, spread it out across your Sysplex, and get it all done in parallel. Taking advantage of the fact that your system has gotten wider, we can take advantage of that. And it does not sort ever. So because it doesn't sort, we'll talk about some of those benefits, but because it doesn't sort, that frees us up to be able to move work around, spread things out, and get it all done in parallel with very, very few resources. We can make real-time decisions. There's no preprocessors. There's no JCL generators. That means there's no setup time. There's no cleanup time. You simply say, go run a reorg. Go run an entire database of reorgs. Or if you really want to, go run my entire system in a single job, and it can take care of it. I'll show you the syntax actually in a second, and even that is open for interpretation. If you want to change it, we can actually do that dynamically for you. We will determine, based on your business rules, does this object need to be reorged right now? One of the things Jim mentioned this morning, and we've been saying this for a long time, table spaces are over-reorganized and indexes are under-reorganized. Well, the answer is that you set up different generation data that generate index reorgs, generate table space reorgs. It's even simpler. Tell us to go reorg, and we'll determine what actually needs to be reorged. If you tell us to do an entire database, and it's a single NPI on one table that needs to be done, we'll do that one NPI. That's it. There's no extra setup for you. You told us, go manage my data, make it optimized, we'll do it. So what that means is that your business now drives the way utilities are run. If you really take a look at it, and you don't need to do it right now because this is hopefully very, very new to everybody as far, this is different technology. This is not a faster version of the old utilities. This is fundamentally different from the ground up. But if you take a look at the reason you're doing things, a lot of it boils down to I've always done it that way, or it's based on limitations in the tools I'm actually using. This gives you the ability to architect your data management based on what your business demands of you. If you need things done a certain way, these can do it that way. Restartability. You never have to change the JCL. In fact, you never change the JCL for anything ever again. You can set it up, Jim said, set it up and forget it. It's that simple. If something goes wrong, most of our customers have the initial rule of, don't call me, the operator can resubmit a job, and that's it. But restartability is even more than that. If I'm reorganizing an entire database and something goes wrong, I probably want to just keep going with everything else. And if it can restart that one, go ahead and do it. But if not, put it aside, finish everything else up. If it's an object that I don't care about, email me and I'll fix it on Monday. If it's something that's critical, go through my page rotation and we'll get in there and fix it right now. Maybe it's something that we can fix quickly, resubmit the job, and that one object will be done. You don't need to be an expert in our utility just to say, go do it again. It's that simple. And availability. There is no downtime during an online reorg, which means one of the things I heard today was we can't do UTS conversions because it's too much, the objects are too big, and don't forget the downtime during an online reorg. Well, we can handle any size object, and we can do it with no downtime. In fact, we've got case studies of a company that needed 6 extra terabytes to try and run a reorg of about a 400 partition table space. Was it 4 terabytes, something like that? They could not materialize with the native utilities. I think the estimate was it would take about 4 days to try and run a reorg if it completed, and they would need to buy 6 terabytes more of DASD. We could run it in 11 hours using less DASD than they were previously using, running the entire thing, online the entire time with no downtime. And I'll talk more about that and show you how we do that. What that means though, is you can actually run more reorgs. We don't need a downtime to run reorgs. And that's what we're going to get into, what the new paradigm is. Well, everyone is telling you run less reorgs, run less reorgs. What they mean is avoid running reorgs, that's fine. But probably you should be submitting them more often, letting them go all the time. And then the utility itself can decide based on the applications, does this need to be done right now or not? Does any part of this need to be done right now? So what are the benefits of all this? And we can go through all this on the side, but that's usually what people care about. It means a 70% reduction in CPU time. It means 66% reduction in elapsed time. It means an 85% reduction in just in DASD in general. So the efficiency is incredible with these. This is not an incremental change. This is a giant leap in data management. This is a completely new way of doing things that changes up your ability of how to run them. Yeah, we'll talk all about these. We'll go through some of these in particular. So how do I do it? I said it's got to be simple. That's it. That's the JCL. You never have to change that. And one of the things I can do is ask somebody if you're using any other utilities and you want to reorganize an entire database like that, come up and write all the JCL that you need to do that. Well, that's it for us. There's nothing left. You also see the restart parameter over there. Restart, no restart, and quick exit. That's really the only 3 options you need. You leave it restart 99% of the time, and that tells us if you've never run, go ahead and run. If something happened before, pick up where you left off and keep going from there. You don't have to worry about phases. There's no phases in here. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Just tell us restart. Or if you want it to start from the beginning, tell us no restart. If you want us to go away, you don't terminate, you just tell us quick exit. What that does is it tells us, I want you to go away. So we find the safest way out of your utility. Maybe that means finishing up the object we're on. We're in the middle of a rename. Fine, we'll finish up that rename and then we'll go away. With these 3 options, your data is always safe. You don't need an expert. Anybody can run these and never have fear of harming your data. That's the thing you've got to worry about. There's no risk in letting anybody resubmit these. Automation built in. You see there's a DD card there pointing to some execs. Automation is internal to the products. There is never a point in the utilities that you don't have control. At any point during the execution of the utilities, you can make it pivot and make different decisions based on what it actually encounters at that time. I mentioned earlier about percent free. Reorg can look and see that it's run itself. It can look at history tables if you want it to. And it can say, I've run a reorg on this same object every day for the last 5 days. Why don't I bump percent free by 20 and I won't have to do that tomorrow? So fine, it can change percent free dynamically based on your rules. That's fine, because you have complete control at all times. That's our wildcards. We have percent, we have underscore, full wildcards. You don't have to set up lists. You don't have to set up templates. You don't have to do anything. Tell us what you want to reorg. Reorg table space, percent dot percent if you want to, will reorganize your entire system. There's also no concurrent keyword, there's no anything. It's always online. This utility never takes the object out of read-write, even for a fraction of a second. And we do it in parallel. This is server technology. When you submit a job, that job, we call it the master job. The master job will spawn another job called a server job. You don't really need to care much about that server job. It always ends in return code 0. All the stuff you care about gets passed back to the master. But that server job is where we can do even more parallel processing. Maybe you want to have 2 or 3 servers. You have sysplex environment, then spread the work out. It can dynamically go to multiple sysplex nodes. This is a graphic. No one is going to do probably 9 servers right now. Maybe as data grows, we'll want to do more servers. But this just shows you the ability to spread the work out. Right now, when you run a reorg, that reorg runs in the address space. Because of problems with managing indexes, all that stuff, data take running multiple jobs on a single object down into a single address space. Well, now we got 4,000 partitions with terabytes of data, and you got to figure out how to do it in one address space. We can spread those address spaces all across the system dynamically. You didn't set up any of that parallelism. You just told us how much parallelism we could use based on a parameter that you could change anytime you want to, and we'll spread the work out. We know our processes. We know your objects while we're running them. We're the experts in how to actually do the process itself. We'll take care of the parallelism for you. You just tell us how much we can do. You don't have to be experts in our products. 0 downtime. We mean this. There is never a fraction of a second that your object is out of read-write, even during the rename phase. What this means is that you can run these all day long. The biggest fear is that we won't finish the reorg. If we decide we can't compete with an application, we'll go away. You're running it because you're running this during the day, or you're running it online because the application is king. Well, we're not going to interfere with that application. It came up this morning that there's now processes that if there's persistent threads, that DB2 can now cancel those threads. Well, that's fine. We've been able to do that forever. But we can add intelligence to it. There are certain threads you don't want us to do. You don't want to just blindly give us the power to just go terminate every thread we see. Maybe you've got rules that if we encounter certain threads, we're allowed to cancel those. Others, you stay out, go away. It's fine. It's your business rules. We'll follow them. It's your system. We'll play by your rules. We never sort during this process. What that means, sounds like a simple thing to say, but it's got ramifications all over the place. For one thing, there's no phases then. We don't need to unload. We don't need to decompress. We don't need to sort. We don't need the extra DASD. We don't need to recompress and then reload. We don't need any of that stuff. We just reorg straight over to shadow data sets. We can do discard processing also. The no sort reorg, come by the booth and I'll get into more real detail on how we do this. But in effect, we have a dynamic reorg for each time you run. Your data looks different every time we reorganize it. So we have a different algorithm for how we're going to manage it. But that way, it's efficient almost regardless of how unclustered or how bad your data looks. We're still fast. We can do it no matter what. And again, this is why you see those ridiculous times. It's why when you run these on large objects, this is why you can run these on multi-billion row objects. This is why our customers that have 8, 10, 13 billion row table spaces don't separate those table spaces out. They get run every single day as part of routine maintenance. We don't care what the object looks like. We can do it in parallel, and we don't need all the DASD to sort it. Let's get to indexes. This is an important thing to call out. I mentioned indexes are a major problem. We love indexes. First of all, your applications love indexes. We talk to customers who have 6 or 7 indexes on a table space because my applications demand that. It's usually a nightmare for utilities because while you've got nice partitions, those NPIs span that entire monster, and now we're dealing with 600 gig, 1 terabyte 1 terabyte indexes that they've got to sort. You know, that's a major problem. We don't have to do that. We will always reorganize an index, which can usually scare a lot of people. Oh my God, how are you going to reorganize my index? Because we're fast. We can do this index reorg faster than they can update indexes. And it matters. Most of the reason that you're running a reorg in the first place, it turns out, is because the indexes are bad. So we'll use the automation to dynamically only do the indexes for one thing. But assuming that we do the whole table space or we do some of the partitions, whatever. Let's look at these benchmarks for a second. This was 2 non-partitioning indexes, 125 gig each. You can see how fast we got through those indexes. Some of these big bar, little bars are kind of comical when you look at them. This is not even the same game anymore. These are fundamentally different utilities. So we can do them extremely fast, but then why do we always do that? The second one, that's not a reorg. That's not actually a benchmark of how fast an unload was. That's the exact same unload, which represents your applications. The left side is an unload that ran in 30 minutes every single day. Customer was running standard reorgs all the time. We were trying to convince them that you need to do your indexes too. Just running them like you're doing now is not good enough. The way we do your indexes is important to you. Couldn't convince him, so finally he said, fine, just run it. That same unload he ran, now ran in 3 minutes. It's a 90% savings in your applications because now your system is actually optimized. Again, it comes down to why are you running these things? It's not just because you've got to do a reorg, which turns out is what most people do. You're running it for your applications. Then the end result has to fit why you're doing it. It has to fit the applications. And doing those indexes is important. So let's talk about how fast we can do those. What we got here, this is a 128 part index, 300 gigs. So this is a pretty good size. Not huge, but it's a good size index. IBM takes a long time. The classic BMC utilities are pretty fast with indexes. That looks pretty good. But the MGT version is 94% faster than IBM. And when you compare it, just get IBM out of the picture now, just look at the classic reorg, BMC reorg versus the MGT reorg, 72% faster than even that. Again, some of these times are even comical about how fast they are because we're not just speeding up different processes, we have all new processes. So now let's get to this. You know, we've already been through this part. Traditional automation just doesn't support what we call digital business. You can't keep slowing down your applications and expecting customers to be okay with that. So what we have, this is what we call the new paradigm. Run reorg every single day. Some of our biggest customers run reorg 3 and 4 times a day on everything they've got, and they just let it go. That doesn't mean it's actually going to reorganize everything. That's the big point there. We're not telling you to physically execute more reorgs of actual table spaces. We're telling you to kick off that process all the time. And the reorg itself, while it's running, without generating JCL, without any extra work for you, will look at your objects and determine, based on whatever your rules are, what your applications need this thing to be optimized right now. If they do, they will. So now that process, remember we had the week-long process to manage our data. Now you've got a utility that 6 lines of JCL that never changes, running every single day, maybe a couple times a day. Data's never taken offline. Monday, you start seeing the performance was going up a little bit, so the utility executed on that object. Tuesday, there was no real reason to do it, so it automatically skipped it. Wednesday, it skipped it. Thursday, it did it. Friday, so on. The idea is now you've actually run reorgs for your company. You've actually now you have really saved money. Your MLC charges went down because your applications were optimized the entire week. We can do that because as the utility is running, it can make real-time decisions based on the objects themselves, based on your rules, based on really anything you want to. There's no limitations. Whatever your rules need to be, we have to follow them. You need to stop being dictated by limitations in solutions and start expecting them to solve your problems. We can do that. That's what next generation technology is designed to do. Take as many inputs as you want, combine whatever you want. As silly as anybody may think they are, they're your business rules. We need to follow them, and we can do that. This is truly where you get to real automation. Set up and forget it. It just runs. All those different things Jim talked about this morning about why you should be doing reorgs, different values to look at, different things to measure, all those different things. If you're using these and you decided from that presentation, oh, I need to change some of those rules, you can have them changed in 30 seconds. And without any changes to operations, you're following the better rules now. You don't have to impact your operations to make better data management decisions. So let's look at what MGT actually buys you, some more of the big bar, little bar. This is actual table space, not a big table space, 60 gig, one partitioning indexes, and a very small non-partitioning index. Again, 70% faster than IBM. These are the kind of times you'll see. The bigger the object gets, you actually get to a point where you can't benchmark these against anybody else because no one else can run. I've got a lot of benchmarks that look stupid because they've got one bar on them. And it says NGT ran, for example, I've told you about it earlier. NGT ran in 11 hours on a 4 terabyte table space. Well, the next place contender didn't even execute, couldn't do it. There's a lot of that. One of the things we talked about doing here at iDoug was starting a contest, and we may still do it. If y'all are interested, come by our booth and get it. We've got queries that you can run to determine what objects in your system haven't been reorged in a certain amount of time. You would be shocked at how many prospects or customers we talk to that tell us, oh yeah, I'm a completely managed system. I've got my stuff completely automated. Well, of course, I've got those big objects that I just don't touch. We can't handle them, so we just ignore them. The problem is, their applications have degraded, but they degraded so long ago, they don't even know how slow they are. I showed you that, the 90% improvement in the unload. They thought 30 minutes was great because it's been running that way for 3 years. So what? Well, it turns out they've wasted 3 years worth of money. A lot of you probably have that. There's some object, one object, there may be lots of objects, there may be an entire application that you simply can't touch because it's too big. And it's going to get worse. The way it turns out is that 10% of the objects that you can't manage house about 90% of your data, or at least your critical data. And that's the stuff that a lot of people neglect because they just don't have any other choice until now. So what next generation technology really does for you, this is a real customer, one of our bigger customers. When you really looked at it, they were managing 20% of their data. And they were considered an automated shop. 80% of their data, I said not fully managed. They would run reorgs when they could put aside the resources, when they could get enough quiet time on the system. There was still 10% of their objects they just ignored altogether. 70% they could try and manage every once in a while, but it was just as they could. It wasn't really what they needed. What they do now is they run 3 reorgs every single day. The reorgs of every object is going every single day. And it determines, as it's needed, does it need to be done. If that reorg, let's take one partition of an object. If that partition gets reorged 3 times that day, it means it needed to be done 3 times that day. So you're reorganizing just in time for your applications. Your applications constantly say optimize. It goes back to how often do I have to reorg? As often as your applications demand. So there can't just be I can do it every week, I do it every month. It's as soon as your applications need it, you can do it. On top of all that, you're also dealing with unstructured data. And you've got LOBs now. The way LOBs were put into DB2 actually looks a lot like back at IMS days with a lot of the pointers. There are pointers from the base table space to the LOB index, and pointers from the LOB index to the LOB data set. And at any point in time, there's a lot that can go wrong. If any one of these pointers, or actually any one of the columns themselves, if there's any data problems in here, you got major issues. And you may not even be able to find, you may not even know you've got it, which is even scarier. This kind of gets us into a conversation about proactive data management versus reactive data management. I would say 95% of DB2 environments are reactive. You wait for a problem. I mean, here at IDEG, you'll hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I got called away because of a major problem back at the shop." That happens. What you need to be able to do with this is be proactive. You need to find the problems before Twitter finds the problems. The scariest part of this is if you don't detect those problems. Let's say a pointer's bad, something that's not accessed very often. You're running reorgs, everything's going just fine. 6 months later, someone calls in that they can't get to whatever you're holding in the lob, and you find out, yep, that pointer broke 6 months ago, and all my copies have been completely rolled off, your data's gone. I bring that up because that's a real case. That actually happened. The data is just gone. Nothing you can do about it. There's no way back. So what IBM suggests you do with LOBs is validate them all the time. Before you run a reorg, you should be doing a check lob, a check data, and a check index. And you need flash copy to make sure these are online. There's all sorts of issues with how these work. If something does go wrong, these things are going to run for 4 days too. They're a nightmare to run. So what most people do is they decide, you know what, that's just not practical. I'll wait for something to blow up and then I'll fix it. It's probably not going to happen anyway, so let's just assume it doesn't. Again, that's if it's detected. The worst case scenario is a problem that you don't detect till it's way too late and you've now lost data. The other option is BMC Lockmaster. It's another new product that again was officially launched today, but it is actually already in production. All you have to do is take that syntax that I showed you earlier and add the aux keyword to it. That will tell us that while you're reorganizing my system, if you happen to find a lob, I want you to reorganize the lob itself. And while you're doing that, I want you to validate the lob too. I don't want to do any of the extra This goes back to the intuitive approach. I've got to be able to tell you to go do it, and you do it. We're the experts at how to reorg the data, how to validate the data. We'll do it. You just tell us go. While we're running the reorg in that single command, check lob, check data, check index, all that stuff is automatically run as part of the reorg. It's a free validation. It doesn't take any extra time for us. So with it being online 100% of the time, no flash copy required, no extra steps on your part required at all, you're now actually validating your data as you're doing reorgs. Nothing had to change with your operations. We do it dynamically. Oh, and by the way, it's extremely fast because this is not just take our reorg and make it work with LOBs. This is designed specifically for LOB data. There are new processing techniques, new parallel techniques designed specifically for LOB data. So we can run in a fraction of the time that just your reorg that wasn't doing any of the validation can do. So the overall thing here is fundamentally these are different. We have completely changed the game in data management. We have not taken a reorg and made it a slightly faster reorg and given you incremental improvements. We're giving you a different way of managing your data. That all the complexity that I can get into about how things work, you don't care about. All you know is you say go reorg. And you know it's not going to take any sort of work data. It's going to validate anything that needs to be validated. Oh, by the way, as we're reorganizing indexes, we're validating indexes too. One of the quotes from one of our customers is, we didn't even realize how badly managed our system was until we started submitting these jobs. And we started finding bad indexes everywhere. This will automatically find them for you as part of your maintenance. You just tell us, go do it. It's that simple. And we can follow every single rule of your company while allowing your applications to stay optimized all the time. So the end result is not just a faster reorg, it's not just less resources during the reorg, it ends up being lower MLC costs because your applications are actually finely tuned. the data that they need to get to, the data which is the most important asset in the digital business, is now maintained the way it's supposed to be, without you having to do any work. And then more importantly, as you look forward a generation, the people that are coming after you are not having your skills. So you're either going to have to figure out how to train them to be experts in other technology, or set this up right now and tell them just submit a job. That's it. This takes care of all those challenges for you, simplifies your world, and makes the database run a whole lot faster. That was a lot of information, really, really fast. Y'all have any questions? A couple minutes, I'm right on time. A couple minutes. Yeah?
Who defines the rules?
You do.
And how do I put the rules into the system?
There's a couple different ways. Depends on what you're trying to do and when you want to do it. Let's look at just what needs to be reorg. That's one type of rule. We have what's called utility manager, which is its own product, but it's not its own process. That's an important thing. We have user-defined tables that for either an individual object or for a group of objects, you can set those rules based on RTS and based on some actually other, one rule may be that we can do in there is, even if I skip the reorg, I want the copy to be done. So I don't want to have to set up a separate copy job. So you can set those there. But then at different critical points throughout the utility, you may have other rules for how do we allocate shadow data sets? What if we run out of space? What are your business rules for that? What if we fail? That's even more important. If there's an error, what are your rules? Those you can set up in a series of execs that tell us exactly how to follow your rules, and those are limitless. Those you can tie into, again, you want to write history tables and then read history tables. If you want to read other things in DB2 or read flat file, whatever you want to do and however you do it, you can tie us into making us do that. And what I love about it is I'm in marketing, so I don't have to make these things work, which is great. So I can go into any environment in the world, and I've never yet had to tell them, oh no, we don't do that. If you've got a rule, we can follow it. Anything else? Yeah.
John, how about a feedback loop on performance? If I'm reloading things every day and it's not improving performance,
Yeah.
is there any way?
So you know what? This is going to be, okay, so let me step back and say this is one of those things I can say maybe we can't do yet. And this is why. So for those of you that this is a big surprise to, I'm from CDB Software. We got acquired by BMC a couple months ago. And we are just as excited as they are. Because what our limitation was is we're very good at utilities. BMC is very good at everything. BMC's got the products to do that measurement. And what we're actually working on now, and the reason I said the next generation technology, it actually defines where we're going with everything here, is we've got products like CASI and R4 that can actually measure your application, measure in Aptune, that can measure your application performance, measure your SQL and see how it's doing. We're now actively working on tying Reorg into all those things so that not only can we optimize your system, but we can tell you and print reports for you for your management to say, here's how well I'm doing. This is why we're doing this. We're saving you this much money. So that's a great question. That right now, maybe that is a limitation, and we're getting rid of that as we speak.
The current BMC suite will continue to be licensed as it is today?
Yeah, right now in 11.2. So today we announced 11.2. And 11.2 has actually 2 sets of utilities in them. So we have customers that are still on what we call the Classic, and we have customers now on MGT. And what our goal is over the next, say, 18 months is to start getting people migrated over, and to eventually there will be only MGT going forward.
So if I'm a customer, I'm going to get this for nothing on the current licensing model?
I'm in marketing. Jim, you want to step in here?
Oh God, here we go.
Yeah. So yeah, the answer is
in general.
Yes, in general, yes. Please talk to your account manager, and a lot of them are here now. But in general, yes. And we'll make sure that the account manager works with you to get you to do that.
That's exactly the right answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And John, same is the case for existing CDB customers?
Same thing, yeah. Talk to your account manager. And by the way, yeah, this is a CDB customer that's been using this, and I hope can shake his head and say, yep, that's exactly right.
Good stuff.
Yes.
So CDB will stop calling me and tell me how much faster they are than BMC?
Now BMC will call you and tell you what a great decision you made to go with MGT. We weren't lying though, so that's good.
That's good to hear, though.
Anything else? Yeah.
What's the minimum processor size, like Z10?
You know what's awesome?
196? Or?
Yeah, you know what, I don't know about the versions, but what's nice about this is that we're actually looking at your system and can scale to your system. We know that it doesn't do you any good if we just rob your entire system of everything you've got. So we're dynamically determining how much parallelism we can do. We're also doing that from a standpoint of what you tell us to do. If you tell us to go reorg, 5 partitions and you tell us, hey, you can use 6 servers, we're smart enough to say that's a bad idea. We don't need to do that. And same thing with your system. We're monitoring your system to decide what we can do and what doesn't impact you.
Was that question relating to sort of the lowest level of processor?
Yes, because we got burnt with the 11.1 version of the BMC tools. There were certain things like reorg and things where you couldn't run it on a Z9. So actually, PTFs came out. BMC did a nice job accommodating us and getting a special PTFs to be able to run on the Z9 processor.
Did you pay us for that?
What's that?
Did you pay me for that?
Did I pay you for that?
I don't know.
I believe that right now, level 2 is set to only support version 10 of DB2 and above, so a Z10 is the...
So yeah, so it's based on the limitation. So right now it's based on the limitations of what DB2 runs on.
Right, and that is our intent going forward, to
Yeah.
follow that rule.
Yeah. Sure.
When do you expect to provide support for DB211?
Now, if there.
Oh, I thought you said it was.
Oh, I'm sorry, DB2 and a 10 and above.
The 10 only supported version.
So you have all the functions supported?
Yeah, and and you come by and talk to us about anything specific, but yeah, and that's what I talked about, especially like UTS migration, all that. We've had that for years now, and we have customers doing it. So yeah, absolutely.
PPRs.
Also, that goes back to the not sorting. The fact that we don't sort means we actually don't read the data, which means we don't care about a lot of things that you hear a lot of vendors say we're struggling with that. We don't care. It doesn't affect us at all. Sure.
So it does support the UTS conversions?
Mm-hmm. And actually, what's even cool, and I didn't get into a lot of specifics. Come by and talk to us. The reorg runs differently when you're running on UTS. So a PBG, again, is another major problem for utilities. While to you it looks partitioned, to a utility, it's one giant data set. It has to all be unloaded together, sorted, and loaded back. We can actually run the PBG like it's a partition table space in parallel. So the times on that are even sillier than these times look.
Maybe I should re-ask my question. If I have a non-UTS...
We can do the conversion for you also. And then once you get, we'll do the conversion for you, and then when you get there, you'll see even more benefits.
You'll convert from simple to UTS? Simple to?
Yeah.
No, actually,
Not
I don't
to-
believe that's true.
Single table, yeah.
What?
It has to be a single table
Single
table
table.
space.
Yeah, but
we
not the
still have-
multiple, you won't do that. Because that's involves the drop.
We have 1,132 simple table spaces still with thousands of plans ahead of them. If we convert them, which DB2 has given us the alter to do that, it invalidates every plan. So
Yeah.
we just stay with simple table spaces.
And do you know if you're supporting simple?
Yeah, but we have several, with multiple tables. in the segment.
And I know we can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about single table simple. And I know we have the same restriction with segmented as well. That has to be a single table. But that's a restriction you're living with IBM today as well.
Yeah.
I can find out if I can get your contact information.
Now, for the segmented case, we do have a solution in another product, and we can talk to you about that in more detail at the booth if you're interested. It's in our Recover suite. But simple is a problem.
Anything else? Okay, this was, like I said, this was announced today. It's new technology released by BMC, but it's actually been on the market for a long time, so it's tried and true. Come by and talk to us at the booth 203. We will go into whatever detail you want. I've actually got our expert here, Doug Wilson, that can go into whatever detail you want to go into. Thank you all for your time today.
Hey, Doug,